I am so happy you guys all came tonight because I spent all day setting chairs up. Welcome to a night of art and ART, assisted reproductive technology. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to all of our sponsors. Food tonight is provided by, I have to mention Andrea Sykes, even though she's not in the room. She feeds us at CART, she feeds us here. This woman knows how to pick up the food. The catering is amazing. So thank you to Vitrolife for that. We also have a few other sponsors tonight, and we thank you for this. Urology Associates, Mandel's Pharmacy, Theralogics, Trigman Law Center. Woo! Feel free. Yeah, this is going to be interactive tonight. I'm too fun for you guys to sit here. Colorado Surrogacy, Shady Grove Fertility Clinic, Posterity Health, Kind Body Fertility Clinic, Pateric Law, Conception's Reproductive Associates, Cryogam, and Delta Dental. I want you guys to know that Delta Dental provides sponsorship to us all year round. They've donated a massive amount of money without being asked for it. Of course, a special thanks to William Hanlu. Thank you, Bill, for having us here tonight. It's a beautiful space, and he's let us decorate it with some of Denver's most prestigious reproductive doctors, lawyers, nurses, legislators, advocates for women's health, and Monty, the bartender. Thank you for taking care of us tonight, too. Yay, Monty! I want to introduce the Colorado Fertility Advocacy Board to you tonight. Everybody at the table is on the board, but those of you who are not are also working really hard tonight. We've got Amanda Kennard Foxgruber is our treasurer. She's in the back running the video. Thank you, Amanda. Amanda does so much for us. Dr. Daniel Mazur, he is my lieutenant in setting up this place tonight. We have Dr. Leslie Akaya, who is not with us this evening. We have one of our fantastic attorneys, John. Wave your hand. John Houston is back there in the back. He's also on the board. The panel on the board, we have Dr. Christina Yanestos, and I want everybody to check her shoes out. She's got Sammy the sperm right here. We have Dr. Cassie Roca on the board tonight. Althea O'Shaughnessy, Dr. Allison Wilson, and then formerly on the board, we have Judith Hayes. Oh, God, I knew I was going to do that. Thank you. And Ellen Trigman, also on the former member of the board on the panel tonight. Ellen.
And let's not forget, also on the board is Gina Horton, our hostess and moderator for tonight, who owns and operates Insight Acupuncture. She's also clinical faculty at University of Colorado School of Medicine. She's an acupuncturist to the stars and almost all of your patients, and she holds the title of being the first female ring announcer for the WWF.
Are you ready to rumble? Let's do this. All right. So Colorado Fertility Advocates. Earlier tonight, somebody said, what group are we here to see tonight? That's us. It's a nonprofit grassroots organization founded in 2018 as an opportunity for professional networking, community education, and advocacy for fertility-friendly legislation. Our members have contributed their expertise and their diverse voice to help ensure all voices are heard in the world of art and assisted reproductive-friendly climate in the state of Colorado, and federally also, I might add. Your donations, by the way, as sponsors, members, and attendees tonight, help to fund CFA to present educational events like this. Our mission is to educate the medical community tonight and advocate for women's health. Some of the things that CFA has done in the past couple of years, actually we started before COVID, and that pretty much shut these kind of events down. So we've done webinars, and you can find those at the website. There's some amazing webinars that represent diversity in our community. We've had over 100 attendees at Advocacy Day, and I think somebody on the panel is going to talk a little bit about Advocacy Day. I hope you ladies will do that. Tonight we're going to be discussing several items, including insurance coverage for fertility treatment. I think you all know that this House bill has passed, and how the Dobbs decision helped overturn Roe v. Wade. So I heard this term, the Dobbs decision, on a board meeting one day, and I thought, what is this? And I decided okay, I've really got to look the specifics of this up. Who is Thomas E. Dobbs? He's the state health officer, okay, of the Mississippi Department of Health. And he's the Dobbs in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, which involves that Mississippi law banning all abortions over 15 weeks gestational age, except in medical emergencies, as in the case of severe fetal abnormality. This is the case that the Supreme Court considered, which we all know now overturned Roe v. Wade. So we got a lot to talk about tonight, a lot. The panel will be discussing various aspects of the current state of affairs and past legislation that's affecting all of our fertility clinics all over the country, as well as the men and the women who are working towards building their families in both the state of Colorado as well as federally. Please, you guys, if you have questions for each panelist, let's try to do them at the end, because I think that everybody's going to touch on maybe what you think of as a question, and if not, remember it, because we're gonna hit them all at the end. How many of you guys saw Amy Schumer's fake commercial about coming to Colorado last week? Did you all see it? Amy released a spoof commercial that references coming to Colorado for vacation in the tourism commercial. They interview women to talk about coming here to get their health care needs met if the state they live in can't offer that care. The visits that they refer to could be with one of our very first panelists, like literally. Dr. Christina Unestos is the current chair and one of the founders of the Colorado Fertility Advocates. And Christina is an emergency physician at the University of Colorado Anschutz, where she is, this is intense, the stuff we don't think about in this room. She is the medical director of the Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence Forensic Team, and she's an assistant professor. She also happens to be an infertility advocate, a brand new mom to twin boys, and a former judo Olympic athlete for the Athens Greece Olympics, so no trouble tonight. And that explains why her shoes say pow on that. Christina and I were talking, she sees a part of this whole situation that none of us really think of, we're not exposed to at Anschutz. It's the closest hospital to Denver International Airport. And I really don't think anybody except Amy Schumer has thought of this. Dr. Unestos, you have an experience occurring these days in the ER at the hospital. And it's interesting, and it's sad, it's heavy. Tell us, elaborate, please.
Thank you, Tina. So I'll start off with a little bit of a clinical vignette. So, I'm in the emergency department and I hear hypotensive patient who is actively hemorrhaging, they're en route. I will say that I start thinking in my brain what's causing these issues, and I start a massive transfusion protocol, right? So all the blood comes down to the emergency department. The patient that comes into the room is a patient who has abdominal pain and has been having pretty significant vaginal bleeding and happened to have come from another state with an ectopic pregnancy. That patient was concerned presenting to her state because that state had criminalized healthcare access to reproductive medicine, that they were concerned that a physician might report them or that they would be reported for reaching out for care. So to date, there is 14 states that currently ban abortion, and there is various spectrum of what that is. It can be based off of heart rate, it can be based off gestational age, it can be based off a number of things. I also run the forensic department, and so one of the things we do in the emergency department is provide these patients emergency contraception. So Plan B, Ella, we help them if there is a early pregnancy of unknown location that they do not necessarily feel is something that is in their best interest. We help them with Plan C. So these are all things that are within the emergency department spectrum, right? So what happens is we see patients and we end up being a safe haven for patients from all over the country, especially now that Colorado has had this climate in which we are making sure that we have access to reproductive health care. Something that Director Polis did was make sure that our patients here are not going to, we will not actually cooperate with other agencies from out of state for us to basically claim that our patients are getting abortions here. And they're also protecting our providers as well. So some of the things in the emergency department we do is not only take care of these patients, we collaborate with our OBGYNs, but we also make sure, our patients have access to contraception. we make sure that our patients, they have a discussion with us and or colleagues, about, whether or not they want pregnancies in the future, whether or not that they want a child within the next few years, and we make sure they have that access. And also when they come in after an assault, we make sure that they have access to Plan B or contraception to help prevent pregnancy and, everlasting trauma. So some of the things I think a lot of people don't think about in the emergency department, but I will tell you that we refer out patients to places like Rocky Mountain Planned Parenthood. That wait time has gone from 7 to 10 days to weeks and months, because patients are coming into Colorado for this care and we do not have the resources and we don't have enough providers and space. So some of the things to start thinking about as this climate is changing, and that we all here are very passionate about reproductive health care and how do we make sure that our patients get what they need.
Thank you, Christina. I think it's really important, as I know almost everybody here in the audience, I think we're really hyper-focused on fertility clinics and getting people pregnant. But the one thing that we really do realize, being on the board, some of the stuff that we're seeing with legislation is how they are coming in hot and they're coming after IVF. Judith, our next panelist, Haste. Man, you're gonna get me for that one later. She represents clients in our law. And prior to, Judith's resume is over the top amazing, by the way. I would take 4 lifetimes to do everything she's done. Prior to and while attending law school, Judith worked as a pediatric ICU nurse, a pediatric and adolescent onco nurse, a NICU nurse at several children's hospitals. She's currently on many boards she's trying to make a difference, and definitely is. She's on the board of Resolve, ASRM's pro-legal group, SEEDS. She's a former chair of this group, CFA, and she's involved in so many more groups. Seriously, I could use her entire 5 minutes up with her resume. She's been through infertility, very open about it, and shares this information like so many people that we all know, some of us in this room. And she's helped to draft many of Colorado's current legislative bills as an attorney. Tonight, Judith, tell us about, and let's talk about and focus on the importance of legislative work in our art field, and what can we in this room and as advocates can do to be involved. How can we make a difference?
Thanks, Gina. First of all, I'd like to say that everybody's heard the expression that art imitates life. And I'd like to say that that's true about my life. I never thought that I would be working in this area of the law, much less working on legislation in Colorado, and now through Resolve in different parts of the country. My journey began with infertility. I was a PICU nurse and then a NICU nurse, and delayed having children. And when I started to try to have a family with my husband, I suffered recurrent miscarriages, difficulty getting pregnant, difficulty staying pregnant, and eventually found my way to a good fertility clinic. And my husband and I had 2 children through ova donation, and our second child was carried by a surrogate because I almost lost my life in the delivery room after the birth of our first child because of Asherman syndrome. And so it's what led us to surrogacy to have our second child. I looked for a surrogate outside of Colorado. Our son is 18 who was carried by a surrogate, and at that time Colorado had no surrogacy law, and I knew nothing about it. I was practicing in the area of medical negligence, and so I looked for a surrogate in California because California had such great statutes protecting parentage and intended parents, and also protecting surrogates. And so it was that started my journey into reproductive law. It was my physician who said this would be a good fit for you. You should think about doing this. And taking steps in that direction led eventually to working with Ellen and CFA on drafting legislation in Colorado for the infertility insurance mandate. And I took what I learned from that journey to working on drafting a surrogacy statute for Colorado. And so it's not that we weren't getting parentage orders in Colorado, we were, but we had to piece together a lot of different laws or parts of laws in order to encourage the Boulder District Court to sign our parentage orders. And so that piece of legislation passed after getting delayed a year because of COVID. It passed in, the governor signed it on May 6th, the surrogacy statute on May 6th of 2021. After having worked on that, Ellen, CFA, others, we all worked on the confirmatory adoption statute, which helps protect parentage, particularly in same-sex couples. And that statute was drafted into law this year. So art, what happened in my life led me to working as an art attorney and working on this legislation. I, because of it, helped produce continuing legal education for attorneys on a domestic level and an international level. And now with Resolve, I'm working on surrogacy statutes, looking at them around the country as well as other legislation. The donor conceived persons bill that we struggled with here in Colorado and that everybody is aware of, I think is going to get into trouble. There's other states that are going to try to pass this same legislation in their states, and they're all saying, oh yeah, Colorado, look, they did it. We need to do the same thing that happened in Colorado. But it's going to take all of us to help overturn a badly or fix a badly written bill, a badly drafted bill, to try to get to the right place. All of us support donor conceived persons, but we need to have a really good statute so that other states who follow behind us also have good statutes. And I'm really honored not only to work with everybody on CFA and to work with the colleagues that I have in the fertility clinics and the mental health care providers. I get such a blessing in my life that I get to pay it forward because of art, because of what happened to me. So,
Judith, how do you have any advice to people in the room how could we all advocate? Sometimes I find myself in the position of wanting to help. You guys all have these amazing credentials, writing all these bills. What can we as just advocates do?
I mean, I think because this is the world this is our professional world, that if you think about things that you need help with, it's important to bring it to our attention in CFA so that we can see, what direction we might go in to fix something. Because this is our professional world. The statute that was misappropriate use of gametes was the fertility clinic physicians or physicians who were contributing their sperm instead of anonymous sperm from a cryobank or elsewhere. And Colorado dealt with that not because of CFA, but it was brought to a state representative's attention. And so that's how we start working on bills, is we get the attention of a representative who wants to carry a bill, and that's where we start. And Resolve is behind that as well.
Yeah.
Resolve works on tons of legislation, got involved in the donor conceived persons bill, opposing it, as did ASRM, as did every fertility clinic physician in Colorado, as did every art attorney in Colorado, and it still got passed.
Thanks, Judith. Dr. Cassie Roca is a reproductive endocrinologist and infertility specialist. I think many of you know Cassie. She's at Shady Grove Fertility. She's also an assistant professor at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. Cassie's a really strong advocate for reproductive health and justice in Colorado and the CFA legislative chair. So she's going to talk to you a little bit about that. She's one of our current board members who is integral in helping to pass the infertility fix-it bill, which she's going to talk about. And she's helped amended this thing that we're talking about, the donor conceived protection bill, in this past 2022 session. Cassie's an accomplished musician. I am recruiting her for my punk rock girl band, and she's a mother of 2 gorgeous boys and a baby girl. And as I mentioned, she's been our legislative chair for the past year. I think she got thrown into the deep end because it was really, really intense. She's helped navigate this new donor conceived bill that showed up suddenly for us. Tell us about your experience in drafting the donor bill and the effect that this new legislation potentially has on fertility clinics, because I think it might be a bigger deal than anybody's really thought about. How did this bill come to you, Cassie?
In the middle of the night. Yeah.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, no. I was actually studying for my reproductive endocrine infertility fertility boards, and we were just on the excitement coattails of having passed our Fix-It bill, only to get an email saying, you know, here's a draft of this bill that we're thinking about bringing out, which later became Senate Bill 224, the protection of donor-conceived people and families. And I was doing actually some research at the time for, you know, understanding how donor-conceived offspring really feel about their experience and what can we be doing as providers to make sure that we are ensuring a good experience for these, you know, offspring. It's extremely important, and it's something I am very passionate about. So I thought, okay, this is an interesting bill because I'm all about reproductive access, and I'm also about reproductive justice. And in reading the bill, it, you know, we all who ended up getting drafts of this bill were deeply concerned about the wording, the lack of limitations, what seemed like a slightly one-sided penmanship, and you know, we wanted to voice that we all felt like two sides needed to be heard to help create a bill that was going to, you know, not drastically limit access and then help protect the rights of these offspring as well, right? And things just came at a mile a minute. It was very clear that this had been a bill that had been in progress for a long time, and at the 11th hour we were being asked to, you know, stop our full-time jobs and other things that we were trying to do and to give input that really wasn't necessarily going to be heard right off the bat. But I think it gave credit to the fact that CFA has enough clout, has helped pass legitimate legislation in this state, that we are being brought to the table without seeking it out, right? They came to CFA and said, okay, well, we want your input. And, you know, whether or not the final product is what we would have wanted, at the end of the day, we're a legitimate voice in Colorado, and I'm extremely honored to be a part of it and to work with so many dedicated people who understand this field and are realizing the impact that we can have. It was initially, okay, how are we going to increase infertility care access? And now this goes into so many facets with gestational carrier laws, it goes into donor-conceived laws, and now post-Dobbs, it's just kind of like, it could go in so many crazy directions. And so, you know, I think the founders of CFA, you know, I just have so much gratitude for them and for helping bring me on here, because I trained in Massachusetts where, you know, everyone had access to IVF, access to abortion, and really wanted to be a part of bringing that to Colorado. And I just think that we are at the genesis of being a state that others look to as doing what is right for the people of Colorado and our patients in every which way, so that you can build a family how you want to and when you want to. I think it's extremely important, and unfortunately, the bill that passed is going to have a lot of ramifications, and we are involved. Dr. O'Shaughnessy's been involved in helping us get, you know, contact with the Department of Health. So as this bill is becoming implemented, we are there as they're saying, okay, well, we have to, we're going to be giving this written information to any donor in the state of Colorado. We're going to be giving this written information to anyone who wants to be a recipient of donor gametes. And we say, okay, well, we work with MHPG counselors, and we have people from ASRM, we have infertility specialists and lawyers who already know the resources and know what ASRM says and have guidance already in place for how to properly have these conversations and make sure that we're there, you know, doing what's responsible and not letting, I guess, for lack of a better word, too much government oversight into, you know, an already credible ethical practice, and making sure that we go forward appropriately. And so we were, you know, able to help edit the bill, which was, I guess, a bucket list.
I want to like take Cassie or her attention from this for a second. Are you guys all familiar with the donor-conceived bill? What it's all about? There's some major limitations in this, and it was some of the stuff that we looked at. Cassie's right. It literally came in the middle of the night, and we all had access to this bill. I mean, I watched these guys like it could have been quite a train wreck the way that this thing was going to be passed, and they edited it, worked at it. What is the limitations on donors now?
Well, so now going forward, they initially wanted to implement it in 2023. We're able to get it pushed back to 2025 so everyone can get ready, because we showed up to initially testify against the bill, and at that testimony, it was an international testimony from the Donor Conceived Council, and we were steamrolled. And it was very clear this bill was going to pass. Very clear from that moment on. And so we were lucky enough to be able to have a part in helping edit it so that it passed at least with a little bit of input. So this is going to go into effect in 2025. And initially it was going to say that only 10 family limit for any donor gametes, which now will be a 25 family limit.
Who's keeping track of that though? Like,
So at this point, clinics, any ART agency that is, selling, distributing, or collecting donor gametes is going to be responsible for doing that. It was that these clinics would have to show a good faith effort in having contacted the donors to keep current contact info as well as medical info. We were saying, okay, well, if we can be criminalized for not showing a good faith effort, why don't we go ahead and define what that might mean? And so got them to put down in language, you need to, try to contact this donor once every 3 years to keep that information updated. Other language, improperly defining what an ART clinic is versus a donor gamete.
that's okay. I'm gonna throw my panel off. I'm gonna challenge them. I'm going out of order.
In any case, I can go on.
No, we all could. This is a really big deal. So what I've decided to do is kind of switch this up a little bit. Pass the microphone to Althea, please. Dr. Althea O'Shaughnessy. Althea is one of 5 reproductive endocrinologists at Conception's Reproductive Associates. She's a native New Yorker, if you didn't know that already. Althea did her OBGYN residency at University of Connecticut Health and Science Center and her REI fellowship at Downstate Med Center in New York. She's been a board certified REI almost as long as I've been an acupuncturist, for 35 years. There you go, friend. She's the director of the egg donor program at Conception. She's a passionate advocate for reproductive rights. We've gone to a few marches together. She's one of the founding board members of the Colorado Fertility Advocates. She dragged my butt into all this, and she's testified to the Colorado legislature helping to pass the current surrogacy bill. Althea is an amazing dancer. Did you know that? She's one of my favorite people to laugh really, really loud at happy hour. So Althea, we're all on this donor bill thing, and I think it's really important. Can you tell us what are some of the challenges for fertility clinics and patients due to the Dobbs decision that makes this donor bill more complicated in the regards that out-of-state patients are trying to ship their embryos to Colorado, and are cryopreserved embryos something of a target that the new law threatens?
Well, I don't think there are any existing laws right now that that specifically state that that IVF is pulled into this, right? But the problem is the language of these bills is so vague, particularly those that consider an embryo a person, basically. So therefore, discarding embryos would be considered an abortion.
You guys get the gist of it, I think.
So,
it's your audience.
Anyway, so I think that we all recognize how difficult it is for IVF patients. They take injections every day. They're a fear of failure. The cost is beyond the beyonds, and that's why we're working on this mandate. And so to add the fact that they make embryos, but they have no discretion regarding what they do with the embryos would probably push a lot of people not to do IVF, I think. So that's the big problem. Well, why do we make embryos? Why do we freeze embryos? Why does that happen? Well, we've been freezing embryos for many years. Embryos are very hardy. They do very well. Pregnancy rates have increased. It's become much more efficient when you freeze embryos for an IVF cycle. So, for example, you create tons of embryos, so you can get a nice good one to transfer and increase the likelihood of pregnancy. The existing cohort that you didn't transfer, you either discard or you freeze. Most people obviously will freeze those embryos for future use. So people who don't get pregnant, they can use that cohort of embryos and therefore not have to go through a whole other IVF cycle. And if they want another child, they can use obviously those embryos. So obviously freezing has revolutionized our field of medicine. So people who want to test their embryos, want to make sure that they're chromosomally normal, they have to freeze their embryos because we have to wait for those results. It takes about 2 weeks. People who have genetic abnormalities, single gene disorders like Tay-Sachs or muscular dystrophy, or many other things, obviously would love to have children that are not affected by those severe diseases. So they have to test, they do PGTM. And so they have to freeze their embryos. So there are many reasons why people have to freeze their embryos. The problem is that that is now in jeopardy in many states. But what's the solution? So solution, it would obviously be to take those embryos and bring it to another state, which
So are you saying we should all invest in cryopreservation right now?
Yeah. But the problem is that there's other things that you have to consider, like not all IVF centers accept frozen embryos from other centers. You can't just assume, oh, they'll take my embryos. No, not all IVF centers have equal labs. Some labs are better, some labs are not. So you have to consider that. And of course, there's costs. So the cost of transferring the embryos, which is probably about $1,300. The cost of going to the other state to transfer your embryos. So there's a cost of travel, there's a cost of room and board. So cha-ching, and I've already spent thousands and thousands of dollars. So again, it becomes much more difficult for these patients to afford to do these cycles. The other option is to do limited insemination, which is not a great option, but do a retrieval, inseminate just a couple of eggs, right? And pray that you get an embryo.
Are we looking to go back to fresh transfers?
Obviously,
Doing that?
Doing fresh transfers. And the likelihood of getting an embryo to transfer is going to be way low. So, success rate is way down. You could freeze the other eggs, but then what do? You just keep on going through your eggs. You get a viable embryo, which is, again, very costly, very inefficient, lower pregnancy rates. Not a great option. The other thing that you have to consider are gestational carriers. Where are you getting your gestational carrier? Are you going to be transferring your embryos to that state? We always tell patients, you have to consider now where you're going to get that gestational carrier and whether you're going to transfer embryos to that particular state. They have to consider the laws that they're in the state. The bottom line is that a lot of patients are calling, they want to transfer their embryos. Some of them we accept, some of them we don't. We encourage them to contact their state legislators to see whether or not their embryos are impacted or whether their choice as to what to do with the embryos is impacted. And to also advocate for themselves. I'm an infertility patient, I can't get pregnant, I need to do IVF, I want to have a baby, and now I may not be able to because of your anti-abortion.
Althea and I went to a march back a few months ago, right after Roe v. Wade was overturned, and the most poignant sign that we saw, we were like, wow, IVF is next. And I think we all kind of realized that it is. This is going to impact our bottom line. And I frequently talk to people about this. The reality is that fertility is venture capital now, and everybody has to make money. And we're all blessed to be in an industry because we want to help these women. We want to help make families, but everybody has a bottom line. This is going to be a big business problem as this goes on and on. I want to bring Allison up to the front. Allison Wilson is a licensed psychologist who's been practicing in the field of reproductive medicine counseling for the past 20 years. Now I gotta say, Allison has a private practice in the Denver area and a board member of CFA. Allison is one of only a handful of mental health specialists trained in reproductive health counseling in Denver area. So she screens a lot of the patients, and through her close working relationships with fertility clinics, she really has provided hundreds of individuals and couples guidance and support as they explore all family building options. Dr. Wilson is a member of ASRM, she's a board member and our current secretary of CFA. Allison, this is kind of intense. So we had a board call and we were all pretty fired up about Roe v. Wade and the donor bill. these ladies lost a lot of sleep over about a 4-night, like everybody on this board opened this bill and had to edit it. And it was unbelievable, the amount of emails. And so we were all kind of fried when we had this board meeting talking about this, and everybody was fired up, and Allison opened my eyes. When it was passed, the donor conceived bill, I was really concerned about donors having any anonymity whatsoever. But Allison, you really brought me around. You posed a totally different view from your community of peers in psychology. You found that donors do not mind being not being anonymous. They don't care. Tell us more about how this and how your experience is good for children and families. I mean, 23andMe kind of blows it all off the map anyways.
It does, for
Yeah.
sure. For years, I've just screened donors. You have to do a mental health screening. And when I started about 1,000 years ago, it was pretty anonymous. But I've always asked, and what if your identity gets discovered? How are you? And about 15, 20 years ago, a lot of the donors were like, oh, I don't know about this. Maybe I don't want to do it. And that's my job, is to advocate, to educate. But over the years, it's changed so much with the private DNA kits, with 23andMe, mainly social media. I yet to meet a donor who doesn't figure out her identity is going to be discovered. It's facial recognition. And so when I asked today, how are you? I now ask, are you planning to serve as an open identity donor or what we call unidentified? And the ones that even say, well, unidentified, their perspective isn't about their identity. It is, oh, I'm not the mom. I don't want to interfere into their raising their children. And so that's where they're coming from. But again, I educate, how are you with this? Not just now, but 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. When you have your own genetic children, are you going to tell them that you were a donor? And I recommend that you do. But now, so many will go, oh, I'm okay if my identity's discovered.
I mean, you and we were talking about this. I heard a story on, I believe it was This American Life, and it was about 4 different people who were interviewed who found out who their parents were. They thought they were their biological parents. And when they did 23andMe, one of them got it as a gift, like a Christmas gift, the 23andMe, and they found out that was not their parents. And then there were people who had been donor eggs. And it was really interesting, the different psychological effects and with the transparency.
Oh, absolutely. For donor conceived people, again, I think mental health professionals were the sole voice 20 years ago, saying, you don't want to build your family on a secret, because that's never a good idea.
Secrets hurt people.
Well, and it takes a lot of energy to hide this.
Yeah,
It really does. I recall when I was in Houston in practice, a patient saying, yeah, we used a donor egg to conceive our daughter. Our daughter's like 5 or 6. We're at the mall, and someone came up to me and goes, your daughter looks just like you. And the wife gave this millisecond glance to her husband, like, how the hell? And the kid caught that glance, and then started to wonder, did mom have an affair? What's going on here? So yeah, you don't ever want to hide it, but I think too, with knowing your genetic ancestry, it's a privilege. I mean, I was not conceived from donor gamete, but other than my mom and dad, but I know things that I feel like every person has a right to know, and I think all of us on this board believe in supporting donor conceived persons. It's how this bill is written is what we're not really necessarily.
You really did open our minds, though. I think on that call, I think all of us we were on a Zoom, and I remember thinking, wow, I did never think of that side of things. I always have been very like to each his own, have your rights. I had a massage therapist many years ago who had IVF twins and was hardcore about those kids never knowing that they were IVF. And I just always thought it was a lot of trouble, you know, over shame. And I think that, you know, the surrogates that I treat, I always tell them that's like donating a kidney, but they get to keep their kidney, you know. When somebody carries somebody else's baby, wow, that is like the ultimate gift, right, of life. That's just like, it is like a kidney or an organ donation. It is an organ donation. Eunice the uterus will speak for that. Allison, have you ever seen a donor child respond negatively?
Well, disclaimer, I don't necessarily see on the back end. I see on the front end helping patients to build their families, but I know colleagues and people personally who, the cases where it goes awry is when it was hidden and they found out by accident. I mean, nobody wants that, right? And so that's for all the recipients, intended parents. It's start talking about your family's narrative. This isn't just some weird thing. This is how we all came together. And I will talk to patients and go, you know what? You should have the biggest badge of honor and pride. I know there was a lot of pain to get to this place, but look how many people it took to bring this little life forward. Right. And what a great way.
There's a lot of integrity in that.
Yeah. Right.
Really
so,
a lot
so
of integrity.
It's more like if it's an accident that they find out. That is not helpful at all. Other areas is, it's I will tell recipients, you start this narrative early and casually bringing it up, right? So it's not this bomb being dropped on the family. But your child throughout their lifetime will just ebb and flow their curiosity about this. And it isn't that they don't know you're the parents, they know you're loved, they know they're wanted, they're just curious. And I would be too. It's like trying to figure out a puzzle. Why do I have that singing voice? Or why do I look this way? And so allowing them access to that information, I think is very helpful. I think it's a right.
Well, I'm the only redhead in my family, and they all told me that I was a Kennedy. So, you know, I want to talk about the Kennedys for a second. One thing that Cassie said that I don't know if everybody in this room knows, I try to educate my patients all the time. Was it Teddy Kennedy? Ted Kennedy was the first one to pass legislation he really was the senator who got healthcare for women passed. So we have mammograms and OBGYN visits once a year. And Ted Kennedy, you know, you can say a lot about him. I think a lot of people in the family have red hair, so that's a big deal. I'm gonna save some of the most intense information for last. Our last panelist is Ellen Trigman of Trigman Law Center, and she is a co-founder of Colorado Fertility Advocates. She's been on the front lines. Ellen attended undergrad at UC Berkeley, law school at Emory. She's a member of the American Bar Association ART committee. She's on the Colorado Women's Bar Association, the Colorado and New Mexico LGBTQ Bar Association, ASRM. Ellen was named the 2020 Ally of the Year by Colorado LGBTQ Bar, and she's a volunteer of the year for LGBTQ Community Center, and she was one of Denver Business Journal's 40 Under 40. So Ellen writes a weekly column for Above the Law. She co-hosts a podcast, I Want to Put a Baby in You, which is super fun if you've not listened. She does not stay busy with 4 kids and her adorable mini golden doodle. And I promise if we had like a screen, I'd be showing a picture of her dog, because that's all she really cares about at the end of the day. Ellen, you helped get the legislation passed for fertility treatment to be covered by insurance, and along with Judith, and have been on the front line of this bill passage for a few years at this point, right? This is pre-COVID. I understand that you had a meeting today with the Colorado Insurance Commissioner, Michael Conway, and Ellen texted me on the way over, and I know that Dr. Yanestos was in on that meeting as well. And we've got some news. Don't want to be a bummer, but here's some reality.
Well, thank you for saving the sexy topic of insurance.
You're welcome.
But,
Don't go to sleep, you guys. Get a cookie.
but, I mean, we all know how important insurance really is, because insurance can be access to care and the ability to have the family you want. So many people don't, that's the difference between having children or not, whether you have insurance coverage. So a little history to back up, you know, we have fought so hard to have an insurance requirement of fertility care. And in 2020, we were so excited for so many people here to come out and testify and tell their stories of everything they had been through. You know, parents not retiring, living in their parents' basement, just to afford the chance to have a child. And we were excited that legislators were moved and we were able to pass the Colorado Building Families Act, which said that everyone was entitled to fertility care, including treatment, preservation, diagnosis, under Colorado insurance law. Unfortunately, the last minute, the governor put in this language about defrayals under the ACA that really messed with the law. And we tried to fight it to our best of ability, and it was put in. And then we've eventually found out that because of that defrayal language about whether this counts as a new mandate, it's like really in the weeds, so stay awake, just hang on for me, it would not go into effect. And luckily the sponsors of the bill were like, we are still gonna fight this, we're gonna do what we can to get what we can implemented. So this past year, 2020, we did a fix-it bill to at least carve out the large group market from this defrayal provision, because defrayal under the ACA, if it were to apply, would never apply to the large group market. So we're at least trying to clarify that this one area should at least be free from being pulled down by this terrible language. So that passed, and the good news, the great news is that starting January 1st, 2023, the large group market under Colorado law, so very like a narrow slice of insurance in our state, does require fertility coverage, so preservation, diagnosis, treatment up to 3 rounds of IVF. The bad news, okay. So there's about 600,000 people who qualify, who have large group market insurance. The bad news is that the other 3.5 million people in Colorado are subject to whether their employers choose to provide it for the most
So
part.
what did Conway say today to you?
Okay, so I had a meeting with the insurance commissioner of Colorado. There are many elements where we've been trying to work with Resolve to see how we can try to fix the individual small group market and trying to get the insurance commissioner to work with us to see if we can make improvement. So question 1, under this defrayal provision, it requires an affirmative decision by Health and Human Services for the federal government to say defrayal wouldn't apply. And we know from other insurance mandates across the country that defrayal has never been applied, ever. So this should work. So he said, is there any way you can go back to HHS and talk to them and possibly get a new ruling? And so Dr. Yantzis is on this call too. And the insurance commissioner told us that there was a deep state making a decision. They would never.
Deep state? Did you say
They used the term. He used the term deep state, which I had actually never heard except for watching Scandal, the TV show. But he said that the deep state, there wasn't. That he said, and I quote, "The deep state is real." That was a direct quote. And he said they were not going to readdress it with HHS because it would make no difference. So clearly at this time, the Department of Insurance does not plan on readdressing that defrayal provision. Okay, so let's try other ways. So there is Colorado's benchmark plan that Colorado can decide to add things to. And in this next year, they did add certain health care. So they added transgender affirming care, opiate addiction care. So they've made additions. They're like, hey, can we add fertility care to our benchmark plan? What do you say?
No, it's too expensive.
Yeah. So no, he said the state would have to agree to give up all this other care, and there's no way they would do it. So that was not a good answer either. Okay, so
So he's no Ted Kennedy.
where are the tissues? Okay, so we're like, well, there is some lack of clarity in the current law. Is there any intention to do rulemaking or guidance for the current law that will go into effect January 1st, 2023. Because we've certainly gotten some questions. So for example, in other states where there have been mandates, we've seen this issue where it'll say up to 3 rounds or up to 4 rounds, and then say a cycle is canceled. The insurance company will say like, oh, that's one of yours, that doesn't count. So like, can we get some clarification to say like, oh no, a canceled cycle shouldn't count against that number? Dr. Guinness says.
We offered our expertise.
they said they have no intention on rulemaking or guidance being developed. But there was about, at least, they did say for those who are under that policy, who do qualify for the care, if they are seeing issues with implementation, please bring that to their attention. So we're happy to do that if there are implementation issues, and that they can work on an individual basis on those complaints.
I encourage everyone who has a small or individual market or is in the self-insured to continue to reach out to, and we can provide emails also.
Can we just
we will
post
post
an email, his phone number, his cell phone number?
Persistence is annoying, but it makes the wheels grease and they start to move eventually, I feel.
So the takeaways that, I asked them, is there hope for improvement? And they were not helpful. But essentially said the issue has to be fixed on the federal level. I mean, one thing that's important to remember about our insurance that's so frustrating is that even though there is a state law that said that fertility coverage must be included, our people who are employees of the state, so the judiciary, Denver Public Schools, they don't have this coverage, they don't qualify for it because their insurance is frequently under federal laws, being self-funded under ERISA.
So we're like weed. Like when Colorado made weed legal, there were no banks that would take the money. I mean, it's just like this really weird overlay of.
So one thing, advocating on the federal
I needed to lighten the room up a little bit, right? This is intense insurance information.
Okay, so the second piece of hope is really to go employer by employer. So self-funded plans can choose to provide this coverage, and we have seen some hope. Dr. Annette has worked so hard with UC Health, which ultimately agreed to provide fertility coverage. We're seeing University of Colorado, DU is providing it now.
Children's Hospital.
So we have seen a lot of progress with employers understanding that this is the level, employees are expecting a standard of care that requires fertility coverage to be part of their employment benefits. So I think having people go company by company and we doing everything we can to support that. And I feel like we can say we will dedicate ourselves to helping anyone who wants to approach their employer and trying to get this covered. And we hear Resolve say sometimes it just takes one employee to be like, oh,
yeah. And you guys with especially nurses, when you're talking to your patients and you're talking about fertility coverage, this is something we need to get out to every staff. I think that each staff needs to be taught at every different clinic. We all have the same goal. Everybody wants to get these women pregnant, but we all also are competitors. Everybody wants to make their money. But we need to coach these people. I think as the people in this room, this is where you can really plug into your advocacy, is plant these seeds, go to your employer and begin to demand it. And I don't know, I know Jane Gregory is an acupuncturist in the room, and both of us, we see patients all the time that we don't get covered by insurance at all. And I don't really care. I don't really want insurance, truth be told. But I think it's really important for people like Candy. I know you guys, getting dialed in to telling your patients how to make this happen. This is what you in this room can do, and is spread the word.
So I will say that a part of starting this organization was one patient, and that was me, going into an office and saying, I'm not okay with this, right? I work in an emergency department. There are resources, there are social workers, there are case managers, there are people to help me navigate through this. And I felt so alone, and how had I worked so hard to go into medicine, and yet I could not get the care that I needed, or even afford the care that I needed. And so I would say one voice makes a huge difference. And I would say all of these professionals, they have that same voice, and coming together is what has made that huge difference. We have a number of things. We've had a webinar with multiple different advocates from all across the country who have explained piece by piece how they have gone through cities, universities, large corporations, small companies to help get insurance benefits for fertility coverage. And so all those resources we have, we can connect you with people. Resolve also has their workplace toolkit, which is also a huge resource also. But you have people who have gone through this and who can also help guide patients through this as well. And so I think the main thing is you have a voice. Your voice is loud, louder than you think, and you can have a huge impact just by opening it.
I just wanted to add that Resolve is now working on not just infertility coverage IVF at work, but they're working on programs for surrogacy benefits through work, and there's 3 tiers of coverage because people just can't afford this. You know, for my husband and I to go through this, you know, we both had good jobs and we had to take out 2 $75,000 home equity loans for our children, and fortunately we could do that. And how many people cannot do that? It tends to be that you get fertility coverage if you have versus the have-nots who can't. And if 1 in 8 people struggle with infertility, 1 in 6 couples, like, this is a bad place for us to be when we just want to have our families.
Just one quick note, if you're trying to help someone figure out if they are under the insurance that is covered, so if you look at their card, it should say DOI on the top, so Department of Insurance, and then their employer must have over 100 employees to be in the large group market. So look for those DOI and over 100 employees to see if they're covered.
And as members, you guys will receive emails, and we send out alerts. We're going to continue. We have a new board coming in this year. We've got 4 people coming off of our board. Any of you guys interested in joining this organization? You guys are really strong. I mean, there's some impressive people in this room tonight, and I think that I got involved because I like Althea and Ellen, and I knew them, and I was like, yeah, I'll go be social. And then I got dragged into all this, and I'm starting to realize how much that it does matter to be involved. And so I just want to say thanks in closing to all you guys. Go eat some cookies, and thanks for coming tonight. If you guys have any questions in the audience, do you? Anybody? Is there anything? Dr. Barry Cohen, what do you got for us?
Yeah, well, it's just a good question. I mean, I am obviously a women's healthcare advocate, even though I don't treat women, I treat males. And so I've been asked by a lot of my patients, which is the insurance mandate, which is going to cover IVF, but is it going to cover the male care as well? Because it's been an issue. It's been an issue in the past with fertility benefit managers. Now fertility benefit managers are actually covering the males side. But on the insurance side, the commercial insurance side, are the male care going to be covered as well? Because unfortunately, the women have been bearing the entire burden of fertility care, and what we're trying to say is, hey, the guys need to step up.
It takes 2 to tango.
Right.
Yeah, it does.
So, any insight to share with my patients?
Well, some rulemaking or guidance by DOI would have been helpful, but we definitely know when we passed it, we're preparing it, the intent was standard of care, so that male patients, men should be covered just as much as women to the standards that medical professionals are advising. So that is the hope, but I will, to add more depression, just Dr. Yanez says,
We're getting the wrap-up
oh
slide
my
of
God.
that.
So what was it? We're like, well, what if insurers are following this? They said, oh, we can't tell. Dr. Yanez, what they say? We can't tell insurance companies what to do.
Insurance commissioner let us know that they could not tell insurance companies how to medically manage their patients. But I guess the other question is how is insurance companies able to only cover what they would like to cover to manage patients? So that was a very pointed question that I tried to wrap up to be nice, but I think ultimately they don't want to be involved, and I think the more that we speak out about things that need coverage for, the more likely that there will be amendments and change, and the more emails they get and the more people who speak out, I think the more likely people understand what is actually needed.
But At the clinic level, we've already seen insurance companies starting to make changes because the law is so new and they haven't provided this before, and then we'll give input like, hey, can we do PGTM and get that covered for this patient? Initially it wasn't like, oh, definitively yes, and now, okay, yes, definitely you can. Oh, well, if they have no good embryos after one cycle, would PGT be covered in the second one? Initially, no. Oh, now that's a conversation. So I think right now is a ripe time for any of those to be brought up, and I think they have a very open ear because, they seem very actually flexible right now. So I think feedback like open often and.
Sorry. Barrett, you're gonna be a loud voice for this. We're gonna call on you. I mean, I think men are not represented very well in this whole situation. They're what? They're 1/3 of the problem? You're 1/3 of male infertility is 1/3 of the problem. Hey, I really seriously want to let Bill Havu go home tonight. I would love it. Dr. Pulaski has a question.
Thank you for having this panel, and thank you for the great work that you're doing. But some of the things that I want to echo and ask a question to Dr. Yalensis. What was the primary impetus for you going out as this loud voice? Tell us a little bit more of that story, because I'm convinced there's going to be a movie about that story. I believe that was your aunt, or is it?
Someone told me one time that if someone tells me no, it like makes me all the more desiring to make sure that I prove them wrong. And so I will say that no is a very strong word for me that I am not appreciative of.
We are sisters, and don't tell me you can't do that. And now look at what she did. She's got 2 beautiful babies.
Thank you, Dr. Pulaski.
There is a question in the audience.
So, I'm Amy Harris. I'm one of the new members for Shady Grove. I think we're all used to kind of spamming our legislators, or at least I was in Ohio, with all the Roe v. Wade stuff. Is there any language we can distribute to our patients so they can spam their insurance or spam their coworkers that we can be distributing?
Cassie is nodding her head yes.
What is that? Yeah, absolutely. So, like Ellen was saying, we already have language that CFA has that you can use to bring to employers or to give to patients to bring to employers that we can make more apparent on the website too after this today. But there's tools that CFA has that, hey, if you want to approach your HR or your employer, like these are the steps you can go about. And then always here is a resource for anybody who wants to ask questions, but that's available through CFA.
I need to say one. Yeah, sorry, I know we need to get out. I just want to say that even though our state passed a very comprehensive abortion statute that protects women's medical decision-making in our state, you cannot sit on your laurels and think that this is going to last. That if the political climate changes here, that will change. We don't have an amendment, and we cannot think that we're protected here. Every time I hear people say we're protected, well, we are right now, but it can change, and so you have to vote.
Judith is right. Judith is right. So, we're here for a lot of reasons tonight. You have a lot of information. I'm really glad to see some new faces, and I really hope you'll go visit our website, navigate through it, stay in touch with any one of us. I see all of you guys on a weekly, daily basis. Any one of them as well. I know you all work together. So we need to really bond together to be strong advocates. And we don't want to flame out here with the insurance bill only. As CFA, we have a lot of work to do. We are trying to figure out what's next and how to chip away at stuff and get comprehensive plans. But in the meantime, that's your education tonight. Thank you so much for coming.